Hello and welcome back to the Ambitious Podcast. Today, we are joined by an incredible guest. And in this episode, we're going to be diving in to something that I will tell you is going to be a framework for you in business conversations. It's going to be something that will help you with your team, with your clients, and actually is going to help you in so many ways in interpersonal relationships, whether it's with your family, your friends, your romantic partner. This framework that we're going to be diving into today is something that I have used in every area of my life and still to this day shows so many ways that it impacts me. This framework is taught by George Bryant. And George Bryant, you guys have seen him on other episodes. There's a reason he's a frequent guest. Number one, he's an incredible business coach who has a specialty in helping businesses to scale all the way up to 8 figures a year in revenue. But he also is, as well, my incredible partner. And one of the benefits is that we have these amazing conversations about business and frameworks and strategies. And I hear something he says, and I'm like, we need to bring this on the podcast. So today he is going into a framework that is called Dreamstorming. This is actually originally created by Walt Disney. And it was basically a framework that was used where he built 3 different rooms and 3 different categories within his company to unlock different states of thinking. So we're going to break down exactly what the model is, what is the framework. You're also going to probably have, as you listen to it, this curiosity of, okay, like this is a super cool framework, super cool strategy, but how do I use this? And so we're also going to talk about specific ways, both in business and in your interpersonal relationships or your personal life, easy ways to integrate this for you. And also, we're going to discuss, which I think is probably the most important aspect of it, your triggered state. Because in communication within teams or in, business or in personal, there's how we show up when we're, doing really well and we're feeling emotionally neutral. And there's times in when we show up and we're very emotionally triggered, and that changes. And so we're going to talk to you about how to change the way you communicate based off of that triggered state and how to know what yours is and what to do about it. And we're also going to look at a bunch of different applications of what this can look like in your day-to-day life. So whether it's the business side, if it's a problem you're trying to solve, if it's your business vision for yourself, maybe it's even your life vision of what you want for yourself or a decision that you're trying to make, this framework is going to help you to do that. So this model is something that I will say George teaches at retreats. He taught to me in business intensives we did together. And I want to invite you that of any episode, get a paper and pen. You're going to want to write down what the framework is. You're going to want to write down what some of the guidelines or rules around the framework are. There's a lot in this episode that's very, very meaty. And so you're going to want to take some notes along the way. So my recommendation to you is grab that paper and pen. And without further ado, let's get into today's episode. Hello, you guys, and welcome back to the Ambitious Podcast. Today, we are diving in with, if you are watching this, a very familiar face. I feel like it's, my gut is saying probably his 3rd or 4th time, I feel like, on Ambitious. But of course, we keep bringing him back, number 1, because he's my amazing partner, but 2, also because he has insane insights and just adds so much value and so many frameworks that I'm just like, I just want everything that I've learned from him to also share with you. So, George, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, honey. I feel like this is like my second home. I want like a permanent seat, but I love being here, and I'm excited to share and to talk. And I obviously, I love your ladies too, since I'm on calls with them anytime I can get, and your people are incredible. So let's go.
Yeah, we got to make you a segment or something, because he's right. He also does do calls inside of our Accelerator Mastermind. So the ladies in there have had lots of experiences. He does some mindset workshops, teaches his framework, his customer journey strategies. So lots of, if you want more George goodness, he does coaching similar to me for scaling businesses, but also he has a lot of goodness in the mastermind too. But I wanted to have you back on because we just wrapped at your retreat in Montana, which was absolutely incredible. And at that retreat, watching you teach this framework that we're going to talk about today and seeing the conversations that obviously came up, not only business-wise, but also personal-wise, there was so many breakthroughs and so much duality of clarity and awareness that people had as a result of you teaching that. And so as soon as I saw the conversation that created in both men and women, business and personal, I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to definitely have him come and share this with all of the listeners and all of the consumers. So with that, Maybe give us to start a little bit of a just short insight for anyone who's not familiar with just like your retreats as well, because I feel like this was a framework you taught at that space, what those are like for anyone, just since obviously that's where it came up.
Yeah. I appreciate you asking that. I'm excited to share this one. I don't think I've ever been interviewed about this one, which is awesome. And we got a whole podcast to do it, so it's great. And yeah,
Yeah,
my heart's fluttering from finishing the retreat and having it. But I think, the first thing that I would share is that all too often entrepreneurs accidentally fall into the isolation trap. It's like our default coping mechanism where things get hard or we're in a challenging season, or even when we're in a good season, we get so committed to keeping the blinders on that we forget to come up for air, and it makes it feel like we're in all of this alone, right? It leads to burnout, leads to overwhelm. And I think unless we're very intentional about putting ourselves in the spaces with other people that relate to us, that understand us, it can become a very, very lonely, depressing, and truthfully a lot harder journey. And so the reason I do these events is, number one, I feel like God gave me the gift of gab, and he's like, so just
for
use
sure.
it and stand in front of people. But I've been
Yeah.
running events since 2014. Don't say it, honey. I don't need to hear it again, that I'm old. I got it since 2014. And there's always this magic that happens, but the magic isn't the event itself. It's about like what happens in that room. And not only from like facilitator to people, but also people to people, right? The amount of validation that happens, the amount of great ideas that you never thought of before, perspective shifts, lessons learned from side conversations. And so I don't think I can ever stop doing them because the results of them are absolutely astonishing for every single person that comes. And
Yeah.
it typically ends with saying something like, I have no idea why I came, but what I got is completely different than what I expected. And I got all of those things too. Plus, I feel completely different. And I think that's the ultimate goal, right? So the event we just did, we always execute them in the framework the same, but what happens in the middle is really dictated by the people in the room. And we spend day one focusing on the player, which is like the mental gymnastics of entrepreneurship, right? Like I say like a lot. I'm really, truly, I'm pulling Jesus into this. Truly, I say to you, truly, I'm going to start talking biblically. Truly, the mental gymnastics of what it really takes to be resilient in entrepreneurship, right? Our habits, our behaviors, our beliefs, our values, and the things that we just accept as true. And all too often we keep the blinders on and we end up running down this road and we're convinced like this is the way I have to do it because this is how I started doing it, or this is the way I have to do it because somebody said to, or this is the way I have to do it because I borrowed that idea and now I feel like I can't change it. And it creates a lot of like mental noise, like a whole lot that starts to affect our habits and behaviors and the things that we create in our life. And so we spend day one on the player, which is us. Like, how do we show up in the business? How do we show up for ourselves? How do we show up for our team? And most importantly, how do we show up for the people in our life that are supporting us
Yeah.
and they're not in the business, right? And then day two, we get into playbook. And playbook is like, great, I now know I have my pads on. I'm ready to play this game. I know how to play the game. I signed up for this game because entrepreneurs don't like to hear that. But you started this, you built this house, you can demolish it and go get a 9 to 5, or you can keep going. And so then it moves into the playbook. The playbook is like how I'm going to take this person and how I'm going to execute on the field, right? What am I going to do in my customer journey? What am I going to do with my messaging? Like your incredible 4S framework that blows my mind every single time you share it, and everybody else in the room, by the way. Where am I going to spend my time getting to the next mile marker in my business, right? And the reason I say that is because all too often we want to jump from 100 grand to a million or a million to 10, but there's parts and pieces in between. And it's not ever about adding more. Every time it's about subtracting more and doing the things that work and doing them better and doing them more efficiently so that we can expand our results. And then day three, we move into play. And play is like, okay, now how do I take that player, take that playbook, and what am I going to shift? What am I going to double down on? How can I do it? How can I do it more efficiently? How do I navigate all these ideas that I'm having, which is what we're going to talk about today? How do I communicate this to my team? How do I make sure that over the next 90-day sprint that I'm actually doubling down on the things that are going to give me a better result? And I love this. And I heard this at the event a few times. Jacob said it. And he said, I want to look down the road in 90 days and I want my future self to thank me for staying focused and for doing the things that I know would get me here. And so we do that in the event, and it's a whole lot of connection, community, firesighting, speaking into each other. And every time, without fail, no matter how much I share, the breakthroughs always happen on the breaks. And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I got to show this, and this happened, and this happened. And I will say I did have one moment at this event that broke everybody's brain when I taught them all that you could pre-schedule text messages. For some reason, that was the
Yeah.
dessert of this event.
It's a game changer. It's a game changer. Well, I think like even in that breakdown of like the 3 categories, it was interesting because when you taught the framework that we're gonna go into today, it was originally very much designed to be like a playbook thing because it is in one essence something that people do with their teams, something that you do with the vision of the business, how you build plans for the business, how you can build systems, like how you can just really build and create as a strategy. But it was interesting because in the conversation around it, there were so many valuable insights on what this looked like in romantic relationships. What does this look like, for example, even within like a family dynamic, in friendships, and of course in business? And I realized like there's really truthfully endless applications of how you can use this model. And so
Mhm.
I think before we go obviously into the model itself, I personally find the actual story around it, which is first like what is it in the sense of how do you name it or how would you classify it? And then two, I remember when you explained the story of how this actually was created. I think it's so interesting because for me, the principle of the story goes to show, like, truthfully, like the heart of entrepreneurship, which is innovation, the idea to
Mm,
do things a little bit differently. And you guys know, just similar to George, we both love a good framework. It's like the marketer in us. But the framework's amazing, but the actual originating of it, I think, is also a really cool story because it goes to show that sometimes the things that are going to be the most applicable in your business and potentially have multiple applications of how you can use it even in other areas of your life are going to come from what might be to others considered unorthodox or odd ways of discovery, but sometimes those discoveries can be like so profound and so impactful for you and for the business. So
mhm.
tell us the 101 of the framework and the origin story.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the story, and I think it's important for everybody to listen to because I share this story every time, and I got to give full credit to Walt Disney. Okay, so this model is an interpretation of his original model, which has been applied pretty differently. But the story is pretty mind blowing, and I also think, to your point, you talked about innovation. I also think the last point of this is that a lot of the times we think we know what our business is going to look like. And so we stay really committed to driving that road and we miss opportunity that is sitting right in front of us that would make it way bigger than we ever thought. But you have to have the tools to be able to navigate it. So here's the story. So if you're a Disney addict, you know this already. I've studied this extensively. I've read it. I've been using this model for years. But Walt Disney had built Disney in California way before he built it in Florida, right? So Disney had existed in California because they were a motion picture studio. They were doing those things. And he had this grand vision of building Disney in Florida, which is like magical castles and caricatures and machines and robots and underground tunnels and pump scents of popcorn in the park to make you hungry and eat food that kills you, right? Whatever that desire was, we won't judge him on his desires, but
Yeah.
we had this big vision and he needed funding to be able to bring this vision to life. And can you imagine, I think it was like the 40s or 50s, this dude who draws cartoons for a living in his bow tie coming up to you and be like, I need $30 million because I'm going to build a magical castle with underground tunnels on top of a swamp in the middle of land that nobody wants and can inhabit. And they're like, you are cuckoo. You
Yeah.
are cuckoo. And so what Walt Disney did is inside of his office, he built 3 different rooms and he called the rooms one of 3 things. He called the first room the dreamer room. He called the second room the builder room. That's my name. I don't remember his name. And then he called the third room the critic room, which I've renamed into the protector room. And I will get into that later with Kate. And so when you walked into the dreamer room, it was like clouds and space, right? Just think anything possibility texture wise. And then when you walked into the builder room, it was like mechanics and gears and numbers, like the how. Like, how would this come to life? And then when you walked into the critic room, it was very dark. It was like, angry, death, darkness, horror. And the reason he did that is because our brains live in one of these 3 states, but can't operate in them at the same time. And so he knew in order to bring this vision to life, he had to be really clear on what the vision was. And so he would go into the dreamer office and he would just stay in there. Like, what do I want it to look like? I want robots that move on their own. I want underground tunnels. I want X. I want Y. I want a magical castle that is an optical illusion that really isn't as big as it looks in person. But if you take a photo this way, it looks huge, right? There, all these pedantic details happened in the dreamer office. But the interesting thing is he wasn't allowed to ask about any other of the rooms. He was only allowed to dream. And then he would leave that room and take a break. And anytime he wanted to add to the dream or work on the dream, he would only go into that room. But then when he went into the builder room was really, really simple. It was, how could it be done? Right? Well, we would need this. We would need to invent robots. We would need to figure out how to build on top of a swamp. We need to drain a swamp. We need to know how to engineer tunnel systems. We need to know how caricatures can move around the park without being seen. And it was like every minute detail of like, how could it be done? Now, mind you, he didn't have the money. This had never been done before. So it wasn't, how can I do it? It was, how could I do it? Like, what would it look like? How would I take the texture of this dream and bring it to real life? And he would stay in that office until he needed a break or was done, then he would leave. And if he ever needed to adjust the how, he would go back into that office. And then he brings to the third office. And the third office was the critic. And he would go into this office very intentionally and he would ask himself, like, what would go wrong? Like, what can't happen? Well, no one's invented an animatronic yet. There's no way to drain a swamp to build on top of it. No one's built a tunnel underneath X. I don't have $20-30 million. I don't know the number. I'm just making that up. I'm assuming back in that, that's what it would be. And he literally spent time actually critiquing his dream. And he's like, but why can't I do it? What don't I have? I don't have the power. I don't have the investors. I don't have the structure. That doesn't exist. That's never been done. And he listed out absolutely everything that couldn't be done or why it couldn't be done. And the reason this is because if you think about a dream, you think about a vision, you think about any idea from as small as launching a podcast, changing your Instagram strategy, launching a business, launching a book tour, launching a coaching offer, running an event. It doesn't matter what the size of the idea is. In order for that idea to actually have the ingredients necessary to come to life, you need to know what the dream of that idea is. What is the texture? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? Then you need to know, how could I do it? Like, what are the parts and pieces that would bring this to life? And then you need to know what could potentially go wrong. Because in theory and in execution now, when you can look at the list of things that could go wrong or things that you don't have, every time you solve one of those roadblocks, you've actually laid the first brick of the dream and removed the resistance. And so without going into the rest of it, I just wanted to stop with the story. Is that good for the story?
It's perfect. And it's called, you call it Dreamstorming.
I call it Dreamstorming. They didn't have a name for it, but you can Google this. If you want to read about it, get really geeky about it, I have. But it's probably one of the most powerful entrepreneur models ever, which is where Disney stopped. But I took it one step further and realized it's one of the most powerful intrapersonal models that has ever been created or existed as well. Mm-hmm. But if you just Google like Walt Disney dreamer, builder, critic, or something along those lines, there's quite a few things that pop up about it.
Yeah, I've had some clients when you shared this with our community who went into like chat GPTing it, and they would start to nerd out on like all the different questions you could ask underneath each bucket. Like there's so much you can do to dive into it. I think like high level, obviously you have the dreamer, the builder, and the protector. But obviously you said the protector used to be named the critic. Why did you rename that category specifically?
Yeah, I love this one because there's some word about what it means in the English language and I can't think of the word. If TJ was here, he would know the word, right? But there's some meaning of the word critic that has a negative connotation to it. When we hear critique, we take it personally, right? When we hear critique, we get upset, we get offended, our guard goes up. I renamed it protector because what it's actually doing is it's actually protecting the dream by showing you what could potentially go wrong. And so it's not me being like, well, you can't do that. You don't have the money. It's me being like, hey, in order for that dream to come to reality, we need to find the money, or we need to invent this, or we need to create this. And so it really isn't a critic. It's not in the lens of giving feedback or poo-pooing on the dream or saying that idea that you have is silly. It's actually saying like, I want that dream to come to life. I want us to be able to do this, but here's what I see as roadblocks that won't let it happen or would make it fail. So I'm protecting the vision by sharing honestly what I see so we don't run into that roadblock.
Okay. And the other thing that you mentioned, which I know you accentuated at the retreat, which is in the builder bucket, and you said it's not about can, it's about could. And so I
Yep.
know for you that you're like, that's an important piece of language, but I'm sure for most people, they're like, okay, can, could, what's the difference? If right? So, like, obviously, you in being in coaching and also obviously being very deep within understanding of NLP, understand the power of words, the power of language. And so when you said in Builder, it's not about how can I do this, it's about how could I do this.
Mhm.
Why do you think that that language focus is so important if someone's going to wanna take this model and start to use it?
Great question, honey. And by the way, after I answer this, I'm sure she's going to ask me about the rules of the room, and we will get into the rules of the room and how to use this. But this is
Yeah.
actually really, really important. So when it comes to thinking process in our brain, there's really only two states of thinking. There's convergent thinking and divergent thinking, right? Convergent is linear and divergent is possibility. So it's a really cheesy example. But if I handed a red brick to an adult and I say, how can I use this brick? What's their first answer most likely going to be?
Build a house.
Build a house, build a fireplace, build a fire pit, put on the outside of my
Mhm.
house. That's an example of convergent thinking, meaning I'm thinking only about the item in its linear use case. But if I take that same brick and I hand it to my son, who you love dearly, and I say, how can I use this brick? What is he going to say?
As a weapon, as a toy, as who
I can
knows?
make an
Yeah.
iPad stand out of it. Dad, look, I'll
Yeah.
make a fort. Look, I'll use it as a
Yeah.
place to decorate animals. Dad, I could do
Yeah.
X, Y, Z, right? That's divergent thinking, thinking about all the other possibilities outside of the intended use case. So convergent is linear, divergent is possibility. So when we ask ourselves as a human being in our brain and how our brain works with our unconscious, and we say, how can I do something? What it does is it goes back and only references things we've done before. So when we say can, like, how can I change this habit? It's going to be like, well, you can do A, B, C, and list all these other things that you've already tried that didn't succeed. When you ask your brain, how could I do it? It requires divergent thinking because could is possibility. So it makes us think about things we haven't thought about before. Actually, how most of us have succeeded in business wasn't because we had done it before. We had an idea. We were willing to try that idea, and that idea became a cornerstone of our business. How we coach, how we sell, how we run trainings, whatever. Right. So when we ask ourselves, how could, it unlocks a different part of our brain and it takes the constraint away and allows us to think creatively. Like even for me, I did this model on my book launch in 2014. And it's the reason I became a 22-week New York Times bestseller, because my publisher said, you can't become a New York Times bestseller. Partially believed him and partially had an ego and was partially triggered and unhealed. And I was like, watch me, bro. But I had seen how everybody else was selling their books, right? They were going on media tours, right? They were doing the book tour. They were like, let me go on the big television show. And I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. I go to a city for a day. I can sign books for 200 people. And then I go on a news station where somebody might or might not buy my book. And I was like, I don't think that's going to work. And so I was like, I want to go on a podcast tour. And this was in 2014, 2015. And so instead of taking all that time, I was like, I could go on all these podcasts, but ask them not to publish it. And I could ask them to only publish it on a specific date. And if they agree to this, that means that 4 weeks before my book comes out, I can drop a couple big podcasts, but then I can have the other ones keep dripping the podcast out over the next 6 months so that the book doesn't die. And I can record 8 podcasts in a day where I can only go to 1 or 2 cities a day. They have 1,000 people that listen a day, 20,000 people, 50,000. This is me manually marketing. So I did that. And when I did that, not only did I become a New York Times bestseller, it hit 16, then 14, then 12, then 10, and 8, 6, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. And nobody had planned it. They'd done podcasts, but they were like, I never thought about asking them to only release it on specific dates. Well, I knew the New York Times was calculated Tuesday to Tuesday. And so I would very strategically drop episodes, 2 big shows and 1 small show a week. And I had them all agree. And I'm like, I will do whatever you want. I will owe you for the rest of my life. I will cook dinner. I will come to your home. I will clean. Like, please don't drop it till this date. And I did, but that question wasn't because of like, how can I do this? Because if it was, I would have been on tour for 6 months. Maybe it worked and I thought about it differently. So when we ask ourselves, how could we do something? It allows what's called a pattern interrupt to the brain. And it's just a state change where we're like, oh, actually there are possibilities here, right? But as adults, we're not taught to do this often. And it's crazy because I saw a study about this as well. There's a Harvard professor who helps people with their doctorates. And she has these creative tasks that she was giving her students for her theses. And they were all getting stuck. And so she actually went to a school and she asked the teacher if she could bring kindergartners to class and give a kindergartner to each one of the students. And by them being there, the difference between adults and children is children live in divergent thinking.
Yeah.
Adults live in convergent thinking. She brought these kids in and paired them each with a student, and each one of those people solved the challenges they were looking at because they were looking at it from a different lens. So that's the difference between how can and how could.
And I think that it is even a testament to how you saw this framework, because obviously from the Disney origin story, you're like, okay, this is how he integrated it, how he created it, what its intention was for him and for his business. And then you sat with this and was like, okay, how could this be applied to other things? How could I maneuver this? And I think it's also a lesson just in general to your point of like, how can I fix this sales problem? How can I fix this marketing thing that I want to do? How can I create an offer? I think that to your point of you reference past experience, or I might even say like for myself, because I know how my brain works, is like, what past evidence do I have that something worked? And I typically will struggle to come up with a new invention or a new kind of pathway or a process because I don't have anything to anchor into to give me the confidence. And I'm very much just kind of like lead the horse. I'm very much a builder, which is the second bucket. So, because of that, I'm somebody who feels like I need to have evidence for the steps. I need to feel like I have a plan of how it's all going to work. And because of that, I have to really intentionally flex this muscle of innovation and of, to your point, divergent thinking, because oftentimes, especially being someone who's very data driven, the basis of data typically at the nature of it is to reference past information. And the only reason you have that data is because something in the past occurred. So to know that I'm data driven and I already have that as like a primary way that I've done business, it's been an intentional thing that I've had to try to be like, okay, data is based off past information though. So if we're trying to innovate in business or you're trying to come up with a new idea or new solution or something new and exciting, yes, there's information that we can uncover in the past that can give us insights to the future, but there's also part of it which is just going into it having no past steps, no past evidence to anchor into and being like, okay, great, we're going to truly innovate because to your point of, the red brick, you are looking at all the ways you've seen it used. And it's like, if we couldn't reference those ways, give me other ways you've never seen a brick used. And I think for most people, if they don't practice or maybe flex the muscle of this bucket, it might be difficult for them to do. So
Mm-hmm.
you obviously, I know, noted to the fact that there's rules. And I think that these rules are important because I've seen people who've learned this model from you who've tried to take this and integrate it with their team. And they like the concept of it, but they don't like the rules of it, which basically, as
Mm-hmm.
I see it, is what George just explained of the three buckets. You're like, ooh, this is a really cool principle. Different ways to think, different ways to look at a goal, different ways to build a plan. Again, relationships, team. Once the rules come in, I can tell you most people start to be like, I don't like that because it puts some bumper lanes, it puts some constraint on how you need to show up and how you need to present in each of the buckets to have this truly be impactful. And so when we think about these three core buckets, right? So we've got the dreamer, the builder, the protector. The first bucket of dreamer, if someone's wanting to learn, okay, well, how do I be a dreamer? How do I embody that dreamer mindset or dreamer approach? What are the quote unquote rules around dreamer?
Yeah. So the first rule is that human beings thrive in constraint. We actually thrive in it, right? We appreciate the container. Okay. So Parkinson's law is I don't know the term. It's not fallacy. It's something else, right? It's the law that states that we'll fill whatever container we create, right? So if I'm giving you an example of this, if you're listening to this, if you've ever realized like you tell somebody you'll have an hour meeting with them, you'll accomplish the same in that hour as you would if you told them you had a 20-minute meeting with them and gave yourself the same bumpers, right? And everyone's like, oh crap, I feel called out, right? That's the law itself, that we will fill whatever container we create. If you're a lady listening to this, or a man, Mitch, love you. The one dude besides me who listens to your podcast. Not truly, but if anybody has ever moved, right? And you live in like a 1,000 square foot house and you're like, God, the house is so full. And you move into like a 2,000 square foot house. You're like, I'm going to have so much space. And then a year later, you're like, how do I have so much stuff? Well, because the container got bigger, our natural inclination is to fill that container. So if we don't control those containers, we will just be inefficient and completely fill it, right? So the first thing and the first rule of the whole model is that you can only operate in each one of these lanes one at a time independently, and you need a break between them. I'll talk about that in a minute. The second thing is you need to have a time constraint each time you're in the bucket. Might be 10 minutes, might be 20 minutes, might be 2 hours, but you have to keep yourself to that time constraint. So if it's an hour, then that means when the hour's up, even if you're not done with the dream, you're stepping away from the dream to respect and honor that time constraint. That's the most important rule out of both of these, is the actual constraint of time. Because if I say, hey, there's this idea or this dream that you have as long as you want, guess what never gets done? The dream. Ever. It just keeps getting moved, and we move the starting line, and all of a sudden it never gets brought to fruition. Okay. So those are the two rules that oversee all of this, which is you can't allow yourself to commingle the buckets, and you have to put a time constraint on every single bucket. Those are the two overarching rules. The third rule would be, when possible, you do each bucket in a different space or state, which means even when I'm running this on Zoom calls with teams, we actually end the dreamer state. I'm like, hey, go take a 10-minute break, go for a walk. I end the Zoom room and I'm like, we're meeting in somebody else's Zoom room. If I'm in an office and we meet in a corner and I'm like, great, hey, we're going to go use the other conference room to do the builder state. The reason we do that is because it actually helps support our brain in changing its thinking pattern when we state change. So those are kind of the rules that exist. Now, how do you use these? Well, in this instance of taking an idea to life, it doesn't matter how small idea, how big of an idea, the time constraint you create is correlated to the size of the idea. Would I love it if I could plan a book launch in 10 minutes? Yes. Could I now? For sure. If you ask me to plan something I've never done before, it's going to take me more time. So I need to choose a time constraint based on the size of the thing that I'm trying to accomplish. And that doesn't mean when I go through it once, I'm done. I can go through it multiple times, but I still have to respect the rules. And so let's say you have an idea and you want to use this model to bring that idea to life. You're like, amazing. I'm going to set some time aside to do this on my own. I'm going to give myself 30 minutes to dream. You actually set a timer. And the rules of each bucket are really, really simple. When you are in the dreamer bucket, the only thing you're answering is, what does the dream look like? The word is texture for me, right? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How am I doing it? How am I executing it? What's possible? But the rules are, you can't ask how, and you can't poke holes in it. You are only allowed to dream. So you can't be like, oh, I got the dream, but this could go wrong. Nope. Wrong room. You're like, oh, but we could. Nope. Wrong room. What is the dream? A really interesting way to think about it is, what are the ingredients I have or need to be able to cook this recipe? I don't care about the pots in the kitchen. I don't care what kitchen you're using. All I care about is the ingredients. So when you're in the dreamer bucket for that 30 minutes, you're just documenting what the dream looks like. Well, I could go on podcasts. I want to sell the book. I could give this away. I could do X. I could do Y. And you just allow yourself to dream. When the timer goes off, you walk away. You document whatever you had. You take a break. You don't have to go into Builder 10 minutes later. You can go in 2 days later for all I care. You still have the dream documented. But no matter what you do, you have to state change. If you're sitting at your laptop, you have to get up, go for a walk, change your room, change your environment, and then you come back into the Builder bucket. Now, the rules of Builder is you can't ask can, you can only ask could. So the question is, how could this be done? And when you're in the Builder bucket, these rules are going to start to make sense. You can't add or take away from the dream, and you can't poke holes in it. You just stay in the builder bucket based on the texture of the dream that you've pulled. Timer goes off, you do the same thing. Then you move into the protector bucket. When you're in the protector bucket, you're asking yourself, what limitations do I have? What could go wrong? What is missing? What's going to get in the way of this dream coming to life? And the rules are really, really simple. You can't add or take away from the dream, and you can't ask how you could do it. And when you step away from this process, whether you do this alone or you do this with a team, what you end up with is a full recipe. You have the ingredients, you have a potential process, and you're like, we don't own a stand mixer. Well, I'm not baking all those croissants by hand. I need a stand mixer, right?
Yeah.
And where I tell people to go with this with every idea is that your action list is actually the protector list. Because if you look at that protector list, you have self-diagnosed what limitations exist for this dream to become a reality. And you solve them easiest to hardest, because every time you do, it starts to bring the vision to life. And so when you're doing this with teams, I just facilitated one of these in Maine about a month ago. I had to have a timer, and I had to be a frickin' drill instructor because nobody understands how time creep works. So I'm like, hey guys, we're going to do this just on curriculum and delivery. How long do you think you need to fully expand the dream? And they're like, 30 minutes. I was giving them 5-minute hacks. They got more done in the last 5 minutes of that 30 minutes than they had the previous 25, because they were like talking and brainstorming and boom. But when I was done, I was like, great, you have 30 seconds to write down the rest of your dream. Close that page in your notebook. And I'm like, let it go. Just let it go. And this is what you talked about with the discipline to the rules. You're basically setting yourself up to win by maintaining the discipline to follow these, because your brain knows, and it's fine, and it's your dream. You can always come back to it. But you also have to get to a point where you understand that if a recipe doesn't go in the oven, you're hungry whether it tastes good or not, because it has to be cooked in order for this thing to go. So when you get through this and you start making progress and iterations, and you can always come back to it. And so those are the rules on how to use this. When you do it alone, it's just as important to state change as if you're doing it with a team. If you're doing it on Zoom, you can do that. You take breaks, you go for a walk, and everybody rebriefs the rules. So even when I'm with a team, like, hey guys, when we're in this bucket, you can only ask about the dream. There's no could, there's no builder, there's no protector. And then everybody's favorite bucket is the protector. That one's the one that nobody has a problem with. Everyone loves poking holes in things, which I love.
Yeah.
But to your
Yeah.
point, it's the other two, and it's a muscle. And it gets to a point when you use this enough, what you'll start to recognize is, like, even if you're a coach and a client's like, oh, George, I can't figure out how to do this. I'm like, oh man, what are you trying to do? And I start asking them about the dream, and I like let them tell me what the dream is. I'm like, okay, like, do you feel like that encompasses everything that you want to do? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, do me a favor real quick. They're like, yeah. I'm like, say your phone number out loud backwards. They're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, say your phone number out loud backwards. And they like sit there and stumble. I'm like, do you remember what you were thinking about? They're like, no. I'm like, cool. Question on this dream. What I heard you say was A, B, and C.
Yeah.
Now, one question, like, if we couldn't do it any way we've done it before, like, what are some ideas that you have, or how could we do it? And I'm over here writing notes. I'm like their builder phase. And I do the same thing. And I was like, actually, I know you're on Zoom. Do you smell popcorn right now? And they're like, no, why would I smell popcorn? I'm like, oh, I just know. I just needed to shift your brain. Like, what? I'm
Yeah.
like, cool. Now, question, if we were to take this idea and we were to go do these things, like, what do you think would go wrong? Like, do you have the capacity? Do you have the team? Do you have what? I'm like, what do you think could go wrong? And typically they're really good at listing those protectors. But then what I end up with is a full dreamstorming of their current question. And then we work through it and it becomes applicable instantly. And so those are the rules of dreamstorming in the idea bucket.
So good. And I was going to note some things that came up for me as you were sharing that. I think number one, so many of us feel like we in business have goals or like a vision, but we don't necessarily, to your point of like giving it texture. I think it's such a good word, because if you think about even like a goal of like, I want a 100K month, most of us don't think about what would the 100K month feel like? What would it look like? What, like, in the sense of how would you experience it? What would be an indicator that you've hit a 100K month? Like, give me details and, to your point, texture of what that goal is. Or even if someone's like, the goal is to say personally, if they want to use this in a personal bucket, is like, I just really want to be more aligned with how I'm living my life. Well, if we asked you the question of what does alignment look like, feel like, and how would you be experiencing it? I think some of us because we were talking about this even in the marketing bucket, most of us struggle to explain that because we talk about
Mhm.
our vision or we talk about our goals of what we want for our life or business in this like one blanket thing. Like, I want more savings. I want to have more revenue, or I want to grow to this month, or I want to lose 10 pounds, or whatever it is. And it's this like blanket statement that we associate with achievement. But I don't think many of us ask, if you couldn't say the thing itself, what are other indicators, to your point, of texture that tell you that you have achieved that goal, even if you couldn't describe it in the one way that you always do? And I
Mhm.
think even that part for most people in this process is exciting, because we even use, which we'll get to, this framework this past week at the retreat in a personal bucket. And like, I very much, full transparency, I feel like anybody listening to this will get this if you listen to the podcast, but like, I'm very much a builder protector. I would say that I struggle a lot to be in the dream because I am always like, how are we going to do it? What's not going to work? And let's overcome that so we can make a plan on how to do those things. And it's always just about plan and structure and strategy, because that's my brain's dominant, I would say, like go to or dominant thought process. But the dream one for me has been really interesting because I realized that I even really work in those buckets and that constrained thinking of what the dream looks like, which is, to your point of the brick, my brain goes to, okay, the goal would be, let's just say for a client, it's 100K a month. Amazing. How are we going to hit 100K a month? Even for me, I found that without this model, my natural tendency was to have the dream be very simple. And it's like, okay, we know the goal or the target, and we're just going to go toward that. And as long as we have that, it's enough. I think it creates such a deeper level of excitement and energy and momentum, and also, truthfully, for teams especially and business owners, clarity of like, what are we actually going for? So many of us throw out these one-liners of achievement or goals, or like, I'd love to do blank, but haven't actually thought about what that would look like or feel like or how you would experience it. And so I think what I've learned in the dreamer bucket specifically is that giving it texture is such an incredible energy around your vision and around your goals that most of us, I would say, on a natural Monday to Friday are probably not doing. And so I think, like,
Mhm.
for the first bucket, giving as much detail as possible, even if you think it's overdone, I think can be good. Because again, not only for yourself, but also if you have team or if you're doing it with a client, the builder is how my brain works always, so that part to me is like a natural operating system, but I think that the builder for me, to your point of you don't want them to overlap, that's been a big learning curve, because I realized that I was almost doing the builder, but then simultaneously while I was doing it, I was like, "No, that plan won't work. No, that plan won't work." Like, I was poking holes in it, to your point, while I was outlining the steps.
Mhm.
So, even for me and for you as business coaches, someone says, "Hey, here's my goal." We're like, "Amazing. Let's get clarity of that." Step 2, let's go to making a plan of how we're going to help you to do that. Typically, I would find myself, like, even before learning this framework, I'd find myself in an intensive with someone and they'd be like, "Okay, great. Let's map out the plan." And they'd be like, "Oh, but I don't have X." I'm like, okay, yeah, that's not going to work." And we would start to go back and forth between builder and protector, instead of saying, "Hey, let's brainstorm." And then we can always go in and poke holes after that. And so in the builder side, I think it's been really interesting to reflect on how many of us, when making a plan, will even keep ourselves from noting down a plan or noting down a step or noting down, some strategy to do something. Because as soon as we come up with the idea to note it, we instantly poke holes in it and being like, no, that's not going to work.
Mhm.
Third bucket, which I know we'll get into for teams and also personally, I personally think that the protector at times, and I know that you'll probably have lots to share around this for people's teams, there can be people in just your life or business that are naturally critical. So,
Mhm.
like, the critic, while it's a negative connotation, the thing that I know you reframed beautifully for me was the people who are critical are in the protector bucket, because the reason they're critical is they're trying to protect the plan or they're trying to protect the dream.
Yep.
And so I think that change of perspective for me was huge, because I think I used to get so frustrated when I would have like this really exciting thing I wanted to do. And sometimes I even had a plan of exactly how I would do it. And like, I know someone even at the retreat would say the same thing. They're like, someone just kept coming in and shitting on my dreams. Like, that's how it felt. Like, every time I felt so energized, someone would just come in and just tear it to shreds. But when you reframed, you're like, Kate, people are not poking holes at your dream and they're not poking holes at your plan because they're trying to be critical or they're trying to be negative or they're trying to be, harsh with you. It's because typically that person on some level is looking to seek to protect energy, money, effort, like you emotionally. Like there's so many layers as to why they're being critical or protective. But at the end of the day, it's rooted in protection. So while it feels like the delivery for some people, there's probably work they could do. There's an aspect of it, which is the reason they're doing that is truly from a loving place.
Mhm.
So I think like for me, this has been a really impactful model, even from when I first learned it from you. And I feel like over time it's integrating in every bucket. If someone wants to, now that they know the kind of 3 buckets, the rules of this, you've obviously worked and facilitated with lots of teams, lots of different, individuals using this, teams using this. In the business bucket, what would be like an example of what this could look like for someone if they wanted to kind of see how this might show up for them or maybe even potentially with a team?
Yeah, so I'll answer that. And the one thing I wanted to say about protector and feedback is it's just that. It's just feedback. It doesn't mean that you have to believe it or not take action on it, but it's nice for somebody to help us see blind spots, even if the delivery might not be the greatest, right? Like if I'm about to run into a wall, please tell me I'm going to run into a wall, right? If I
Yeah.
hear you and I keep running, great, that's on me, but I can't say like you didn't tell me, right? So it's important. And I also think what's important to make a note about that as we transition, I'm sure after this question, into how this applies personally, is what you also have to be aware of is somebody's come from in these buckets, right? Because there are plenty of people that, because of their own life or their own situations, have an agenda that's self-serving that isn't necessarily about ours or what we want to do, right? Like, if you're an entrepreneur, you know this. When you go to a dinner with kids that you went to college with and you haven't talked to them forever, they're like, how are you doing that? That doesn't make sense. X, Y, Z, right? But they're not in the entrepreneurial bucket. So you also have to be filtered on what feedback you weigh the most, right? And making sure that you allow that protector bucket in and those ideas, but also knowing that they're not all on the same level. And I think that's important, right? So when it comes to answering how to utilize this in a company or with a team, it's actually really, really simple. The first thing is you have to brief this. Like you have to explain what it is and why it's happening, right? Because what happens with teams a lot, and I see these mistakes happening all the time, is when I go into meetings, people be talking over each other because they feel like they're not going to be heard, right? So you have people that are dreamer. They're like, oh, every time you poo poo on my ideas, and then I get frustrated and I don't want to talk. And then the builders are like, yeah, but we don't have the budget for this. Like we're doing X, Y, Z. Where's this going to fit into the books? And the protector's like, why are we even having this meeting? We haven't done the other 3 things yet. Right. And
Yeah.
it's this constant,
Yeah.
really chaotic dance that isn't protecting progress. And so
Yeah.
understanding this is that even facilitating this or utilizing this in your team doesn't actually mean that everything that you do is going to be taken action on immediately, because one of the protectors is like, we don't have the space in the schedule till Q4. Amazing. Well, let's get clarity now because now we're ahead for Q4. So briefing it is huge, and getting buy-in, as my client Dave calls it, buy-in from the team. Everyone's going to be heard, and we're all going to make sure we have equal parts so that we can get clarity on what this looks like. And then once it's briefed, it's really just facilitated simply, where there's some ground rules. Like this is, hey, we all agree, right? Like if I go off track, just yell dreamer at me, screaming at me. I don't care. Throw a stuffy at me for all I care. Like get my attention and get me back in the dream. And it's everybody as a team holding this together to be able to do this creative brainstorming. But it really, really is simple. It really, really is simple to execute. And what you'll realize after a while is that when you do this, even when you bring it to your awareness, you'll start to think like this differently. So will team members, right? They'll be like, hey, I got an idea, but before you even get there, I have the builder part and I have the dreamer part, but I need your help to poke holes in it, right? And it starts to change the way that you communicate and the way that you execute ideas, because I say this all the time, like every idea is a good idea if there's a plan to integrate it and execute it. And without these ingredients, it's just word salad or idea salad spinning around in your brain and like nobody ever eats, right? And
Yeah.
so it also gives us the opportunity to realize where we waste time in meetings or we're going back and forth. Or to your point, if we were able to measure the amount of hours as entrepreneurs where we have an idea that we poo-poo on it immediately, have an idea, poo-poo on it immediately, and then 3 hours later, we're still staring at a blank sheet of paper, we could have had 17 recipes in the oven if we just picked one and we're like, well, let's actually go through this and pressure test this, right? And so It applies to microbytes and macrobytes, but the most important is to follow the recipe. And so really, as long as somebody is aware of the model and you just teach it to them, you're like, hey, it's going to take me 5 minutes to teach this to you. I want to do this exercise. Then you start co-facilitating it and you have the bumpers and the ground rules, and you could do it anywhere. I've done this exercise with teams of 50 and it's magical. The hardest thing is having a scribe to write it all down because it's going bonkers, right? You got
Mm-hmm.
everybody contributing, and then people, once you pick up the vibe of it, and to your point, like sometimes it's a struggle to dream, but when you're surrounded by people dreaming, all of a sudden your brain
Yeah.
starts going bonkers, right? So,
Yeah.
it's, I feel called to share this, but I remember teaching this at one of the events and I didn't use the red brick model. I used a completely different one. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
all right, everybody, we're standing here in Montana. I'm going to ask you one specific question. I just want you to tell me the dream. And I was like, I want to be on the moon tomorrow. How could I do it? Right? Like, tell me how to get to the moon. And everyone's staring at me like I'm bonkers, right? Like, they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, just like dream with me. How could I do it? And then someone gets brave and they're like, well, you could call Elon and get in a spaceship. I'm like, awesome, cool. What else? Right. And then someone's like, well, that Blue Origin thing. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, still very convergent thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
then someone's like, you could fly. And I'm like, boom, I could fly. Right. And then it started coming out like crazy. You could teleport, you could do X, you could do Y. But there's these things that we love about kids that we make wrong about ourselves as adults. And it's not that the dream is crazy. It's that when we think it out loud and speak it out loud, our brain starts to process other possibilities. Now, obviously, I can't fly yet. I'm still figuring that
Yeah.
out, right?
Protector, we don't know how to fly. Yeah.
But just thinking through that starts to unlock these other areas. And so as you're surrounded by it and you use it more, it starts to work that muscle of your brain. And I'm like, no, let's be silly. Now we think about this in the lens of business. Some of the most memorable marketing campaigns that we look at for companies, you can see and you'd be like, if that was briefed in my room, we would have fired them.
Totally. Think about Old Spice. Imagine someone sitting in the room at Old Spice being like, here's my thoughts. Half man, half horse. And they're like, we've never seen half man, half horse in anyone's marketing. There's no way that will work. People won't get it. It will need like I could 100% see the explanation, or Geico using a lizard as their, or a little whatever
or
he
the
is
or the
as
caveman.
yeah.
Or Squatty Potty, where they're like, hey, people aren't pooping normal. We're going to make an animated video of a unicorn pooping rainbow ice cream into a cone and get somebody
Yeah.
to eat it and sell $100 million worth of a toilet stand,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All of those came
Totally.
from divergent thinking and possibility. And so when it comes to facilitating it, it's just actually practicing it. And it's allowing yourself that curiosity and that freedom to be able to play inside of those buckets. And
Mhm.
that same divergent thinking doesn't just apply to the dream, it also applies to the builder, right? And then that allows you to think of things that you haven't thought about because there's millions of ways to do everything. We limit ourselves so frequently because we keep the blinders on and we don't open up the possibility. So, did that answer your question?
100%. And I think that this will also transition into, because I know we had a great conversation about this at your event around the personal bucket. And one of the things that I know originally when I learned this model, full transparency, I was like, oh, that person's a protector. That person's a builder. Like, I kept labeling everybody. I'm like, I know exactly which one you are. And you're typically, as you listen to this, going to know who the protectors are. Because again, to his point, you get emotionally activated by people
Mm-hmm.
poking holes in your dream or in your plan. But I think something that, you talked about at the event that I think is really, really important is that people have a dominant, and when triggered, go to certain other buckets than their
Mm-hmm.
dominant.
Yeah.
So, like, for me, I'm a natural builder, but I would say when I get very triggered or when I feel like unsafe. So, for example, if I say to someone, okay, like, here's what I'm trying to do and here's a plan of how I'm going to do it. If somebody adds a portion to the dream that I don't think is realistic, or if I don't like, I didn't have a step in my plan for that, like, that's not something I had thought of, it makes me feel very triggered and I go, no, that won't work. And I start to poke holes in it.
Yeah.
So I think I would be curious if you could share with people what you shared at the retreat, which was helping people to understand that we do have dominant styles we naturally lean
Mm-hmm.
toward. And we also have triggered states that basically, as a result of I don't know if you would label it this way, but like emotional activation or a lack of
Mhm.
nervous system regulation for whatever reason.
Yep.
The reason is not necessarily as important as it is the fact that it's happening in a moment that we go to a triggered state. And I think the thing that came up at your event, which I thought was really insightful, is to have grace with people as to why that is their dominance. So, like, if
Mhm.
someone, like for myself, I would say that I am a builder or I'm all about the plan and I'm also about the worst case scenario in basically everything business, life, personal, because I grew up with a lot of uncertainty.
Mhm.
And there was many times I remember like things happening, but we had no plan on how we were going to solve them. And all I could ruminate on was all the negative things that could happen.
Mhm.
So now what happens in my life is when someone's like, and you and I even have these conversations of like, this XYZ would be possible, or like this is what it could look like. And you're like so in a beautiful dream state. I'm there like that won't work. There's no plan, there's no steps. And I appreciate that aspect of like seek to understand where it comes from, that triggered
Mhm.
state, because I think when you do, you have more grace with people to realize that this model is not just like for some teams, they're like, hey, you're the protector today. But realize that that might not be as easy for one person to the next because they have lived experiences that have caused them to be that dominant way. And as a result, there's lived experiences that are the reason they're also triggered to go into a different state.
Yeah. Would it be helpful before I answer that if I explain how they apply intrapersonally?
Totally. Totally.
Okay. So now, and I'm going to close the loop from the very beginning where I was like, there's two ways for this model. Way number one is an idea, right? We just covered for 50 minutes what that idea and what those possibilities are. And I just want to land the plane a little bit. Also, as a side note for you as an entrepreneur with a team, with anybody, you should not be giving them anything to do unless you are clear that you have at least an item or two from the dream, from the build, or from the protector, or else you're just creating more noise. And so to utilize this independently means when I go to my CEO and I'm like, hey, I want to change the intros of the podcast to be more like this. Here's how I'm going to do it and what I might need from you. But I thought this might potentially go wrong. Do you have any thoughts? It gives my team everything they need to be like, we're either putting that on the menu or we not. And it doesn't create inefficient back and forth. So that's a little side bonus piece that I felt like adding. So then on the second part, which is how do these apply intrapersonally? What I mean by that is personal relationships. Kate has alluded to this multiple times. We all naturally live in a state. Some of us live in a state differently in our business than we do in our life. Okay. When I am in the business, I am very much a builder. When I am in my personal life, I am very much a dreamer, right? In Kate and I's relationship, I'm the dreamer. We can label me that all day. I oscillate between them all very well because I facilitate them all very well. And when I'm conscious, I know that I'm in it. When I'm triggered, I go straight protector. Okay. So what I mean by this is that if you think about somebody that you're really close with right now, you can see which state they live in by default. So a really good way to litmus test this, if you ask somebody a question and they answer it with no how whatsoever, they're a dreamer, right? It's like, hey, like I want to go out this weekend. And they're like, yeah, we could go here and there and there and there. You're like, oh, 100% dreamer. If you're like, hey, I want to go out this week, and they'd be like, well, where can we get a reservation? What time are we going? I need to figure out how many people are going to be there so that we can get a table because it's hard to get in Toronto. And you're like, oh, builder, right? If then you're like, hey, I want to go out this weekend, and they're like, I can't make plans. I don't know what the rest of the week's going to be like. I don't know how I'm going to feel. I don't want to get dressed up. I don't want to go be around people. And you're like, oh, got it. Protector, right? It's a really easy way to see kind of what everybody's natural state is. And I have to say this to everybody listening to this. This came up at the event. How you use this in the intrapersonal bucket means the moment you have the awareness of it, it's your job to control the dance, not your job to blame them for dancing in the wrong bucket. So if you're having a conversation with somebody and you realize you're not getting anywhere, this happens in relationship all the time because most men are builders and a lot of women are dreamers. And so a woman will want to share or say something, and then the dude's responding the whole time, no, honey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And she's like, I just want you to hear me. He can't turn off the builder mode and she can't turn off the dreamer mode. So they end up clashing, right? So This model applies intrapersonally because all of us live in one of these states. The best teams you'll ever build are one dreamer, one builder, one protector. It works like a charm every single time once everybody's aware of this. And so the reason I say that is because, to Kate's question now, to answer that, is we all have a natural state. So the questions that I gave you a couple of minutes ago of like, you ask somebody a question, which state are they in? That's level one of like knowing what state they live in, because now you can know how to communicate with them. So if you're a builder and you're talking to a dreamer and you're trying to make a plan, you know they're in dream state. So you let them answer in dream. You're like, hey, I got you. I heard you. Can you do me a favor? I love that idea and I want to do it this weekend, but can you help me plan it a little bit? Because I'm having a little anxiety about like how we're going to get it all done. Can we just focus on that for a minute? They're like, yeah, totally. Because it's an invitation to change their natural state, right? Or if we're thinking about going out or running an event and you're like, oh, we got all this. I'm like, hey, have I missed anything that like could potentially go wrong? Like, can you pressure check this with me? Like, did we do this? What else is missing? When you have an awareness of it, you can meet people in the conversation and get the other parts and pieces. So to Kate's point, we all have a natural state, but we also have a triggered or tickled state. I call it tickled because I hate the word triggered. Tickled, okay? Meaning where any point where we're getting defensive, we're emotionally activated, we're checked out, that is what I would consider tickled, right? And typically what I have found is that dreamers and builders always triggered go into protector, like 9 out of 10 times, right? So if you have somebody who's naturally like, yeah, we can do this, and they're all of a sudden like a caged animal in a corner, they are not in the right thinking mind or the right state to be making a decision. They're completely triggered. Protectors, interestingly enough, go into the dream or builder and they're like, do whatever you want. Yeah, we can totally do it. It's like they're checked out and completely like reserved to whatever happens, when their natural state is typically like, yeah, but what about this? And so you can start to see these and navigate these. And I want to give an example because I've taught this model. I have a lot of clients that are couples where one's an entrepreneur, the other one works with them, or they're business partners. And I've taught them this model on ideas, and it saved their marriage, because what they started to recognize is that when they were going home, they were trying to have the same conversation, but they were standing on 2 different dance floors. And when that happens, the only thing that happens is friction. And so the reason I share this is because whoever's aware of this model has the authority and the invitation to lead the dance somewhere else. So for Kate, as my partner who I love dearly, she's builder. So I know anytime I ask you a question, honey, you are going to tell me how we can or can't get it
Without
done.
fail. Yeah.
And then in that, I'm like, actually, I love that. But can you dream with me for a minute? Like, I'm just curious. Like, what about this? Could we do this? Could we go here? And it's inviting the other person and meeting them where they are to make sure that all parts are complete and heard. And I know this because I've personally experienced this with friendships. I've experienced this with people in relationships. And I have specific examples where I've seen people, myself included, get into a fight because something was done. And then, I come home and I'm like, hey, tell me, like, how is it? And they're like, well, I thought about, and I could do this, this, this. I'm like, but I just did that. And it turns into this massive blow up. And then once the dust settles, they're like, I was talking about in 10 years. And I was like, I'm hearing it like builder right now, protector, like we can't. And it happens with money conversations. It happens with time conversations. It happens with plans. And so it's important to understand this model, because when you can see the state that somebody's in, you can meet them in that state, even if it's not your default. So even on my team, in my business, I naturally live in builder because I was a solopreneur for so long. And it took me a long time to learn how to have a team. Well, once I had an incredible team member, Ashley, she's a builder by trade. Like she's builder all day, which has allowed me to be a dreamer. And so I'm like, we could do this. But when Ashley needs something from me, she knows that if she asks me a question, she's going to get a dreamer answer. Like, yeah, we could totally do that. We could have this at the event. So she'll message me and she'll be like, hey, George, I need you to build with me for a minute. Here's my thoughts. What do you think on building this? And neither of us are protectors in the business. So what'll happen is she'll have an idea or something we'll execute, and she'll be like, hey, I need you to do me a favor. I'm going to send you this video. I need you to poke holes in it and find everything you don't like about it. And I'm going to do the same. And we actually both mutually invite ourselves into that protector bucket. so that we can find those flaws and then communicate effectively. And we had to start doing that because if we think about Kate's example of how many times we've had an idea and we like go to the person we love the most and we're like, oh my God, honey, like this happened during my day. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then your partner who's not an entrepreneur says like, yeah, but how are you going to do that?
That's not realistic. That's going to take too
That's
much
not
time.
realistic. It's going
Yeah.
to take too much time. We don't have the money, right? Or the other version, if you're a dreamer, is like, you can't do that. You don't have the ability to do that. And immediately we shut down, get triggered, and go into protector. And then two protectors are fighting and nothing happens. What I do now when that happens, and when you're in protector mode, sometimes I say in my brain, I'm like, thank you for protecting our vision. And I can hear it differently.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know that when you're done telling me how you're going to protect it, I can ask questions. And so what it gives us is this massive awareness of what's actually happening so that we can navigate the conversation without shutting down and allowing progress to happen. And as you use this model over and over and over, like everybody in my life knows this model. You see it in my personal circle. We all joke about it, right? Like we'll be at dinner and it's like, oh, boom, boom, boom. We're like, okay, well, what's the dream? And they're like, well, you're probably going to shut this down and protect it. I'm like, well, it's because I love you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of becomes this fun play where it neutralizes it and it allows everybody to communicate the same way. And so that's the intrapersonal kind of relationship with the buckets.
Well, and it was interesting. I was sharing at the retreat. So, like, when George and I saw each other last, like, as he said, I live in the builder, and then when I'm triggered in the protector. And so, obviously, you guys know that we're long distance. So, because of that, I have these moments every time we get together. I have this like awareness of like, oh man, I need a plan. I need a plan. I need a plan. I need timelines. I need checklists. I need something to anchor into, because that's like for me again being that dominant, like that's what makes me feel, I
Safe.
guess I would say, validated or seen, is like having, okay, great, we're on the same plan. And so then when I get emotional, I typically go into like this pessimistic poke holes and everything. That won't work. That won't work. And it actually came up a decent amount of times for me on the receiving end at the retreat, because like the first time we were having this conversation and I was in protector and you were triggered as well as me. So you went into builder and you're like, I'm doing, to your point earlier, as men
Uh-huh.
love to solve problems. You're like, Kate, I did this. I did this. I'm doing this. I'm working on this. Like I'm making things happen. I'm moving pieces. And I'm like, yeah, but, and I started to poke holes and everything. And it was really interesting. And like, I just want you guys to picture, we're sitting out on the back patio in rocking chairs having this conversation. And we're looking at the beautiful landscape of Montana. And mid conversation, this man walks up and he leaves. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I guess the conversation's over. What's happening? No, like less than 30 seconds later, he literally comes back and is in a completely different state. He was like, okay. And I'm like, okay. Because now I'm like, which state is he in? He literally physically, to your point about state change, you physically removed yourself. Like you kind of like mid conversational, like, interaction, which I think is also a testament to like even the people who know this framework, dive into it, integrate it, you still have levels where you become unaware. And in that moment, he became aware. He was like, whoa, I know exactly what's going on here. Literally removed himself, came back, sat in the chair, and it was like such a different energy. And he was like, okay, great. Tell me what you're scared of, or like tell me what I can do to support you, kind of thing. Cause he was like, he realized in the moment that I really wasn't looking for like, here's how we're going to all do it. I was looking to be, which you said at the retreat for other people as well, people who are in fear or who are resistant or who are in that protector are just looking to be validated. They're looking to be heard. They're looking to be seen. And like in that moment, I'm fully aware that we don't have this perfect step plan, but it wasn't really like, hey, in this next 10 minutes, I need you to outline all the ways that this is going to work for us. It was really that I was so emotionally, again, dysregulated that I was in this bucket of, I'm worried about this. I'm scared about this. What if this doesn't work? What if this doesn't happen for us? And when you came back and sat and were like, I hear you. Like, I am so sorry that that's how that feels. I totally understand the feeling you're mentioning of X. Everything just started to dissipate. And I was like, okay, great. Because all I was really looking for was validation. I just didn't at that time know it. And it was interesting later down the road, after he taught everybody at the event this framework, we were having this fireside chat. And one of my incredible friends and clients, Maddie, I was at the fire and I was like, "Yeah, well, well, this isn't a plan and this won't work." And I was again in another mode of my natural operating system of just like a little negative Nance. And also with that, I didn't have a plan. So because of that, I was just poking holes in everything. And she just was like, "Can I be really direct with you?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Okay, great. Like, there are ways that this can work." And literally, her and another incredible team member, Kelsey, flat out said to me in basically these same words, which is like, "You know what?" They had shared all these different dreams of how it could work, all these opportunities, all this like vision of what was possible. And both of them had these beautiful things they mentioned. But then all my answers were, "Yeah, but I'm too this," or "Yeah, but that won't work because of X," or "Yeah, but I can't because of X." And I remember Kelsey and her team alongside Maddie in this share was basically like, "Hey, you know what? It seems like no matter what we say, you're going to find a reason that it won't work. So I think that this is really just something that you have to sit with." And I remember in that moment feeling so called out because I was like, "You are so deep, like dug in as a protector right now," because I was so emotionally activated by what we were talking about that I didn't even realize they did have really good ideas and they did have really like incredible, intentional shares. And it was only once I got back to being regulated that I went back into my natural bucket, not my activated or triggered bucket. And I remember saying to you, like, the next day, I was like, "You know what? I really am taking to heart what Kelsey and Maddie were sharing, and I'm gonna think about it." Because it basically was like, "Hey, girl, you're sitting in this bucket of like, that's not a good plan, that's not gonna work." Or I would say, "Okay, well, if you have this big idea, let me try to build a plan for it." And there was no clear plan. So because of that, I was like, "This is stupid, I'm throwing it out." And having someone directly call you out and be like, "Hey, I can clearly see that we're not having the same conversation right now, meaning you're not open to going from protector to dreamer right now. So we should maybe revisit this conversation when you're open to coming to dreamer."
Mhm.
It was difficult for me, but it was also very beautiful because it makes you realize that we really do have these like such deep, I don't know if you would call it this way, but like wounds of
Mhm.
how we operate. And I reflected after I kind of like came back to baseline. How many friendships has that maybe I've had a conversation with a friend and they felt so invalidated because I went to like, "Well, it won't work because of this," or I was in a different bucket maybe, or maybe even interpersonally, like you said, in like a romantic relationship. Like, are there situations where I was trying to build a plan for someone, they just wanted to kind of dream together? And this framework, I personally feel, while it is so impactful in business, and there's so many ways to what you noted that you can apply it, I think that this is actually, in my personal opinion, more profound from an interpersonal standpoint of friendships, even probably for you or for anyone listening who's a parent and your
Mhm.
kids are like, "Dad, we could do this." And you're like, "No, we can't because we have to get groceries and we have to do this," right? And you just kind of are like, "Kill the dream. This is what the plan
Mhm.
is, or this is why it won't work." There's so many interpersonal applications. And so I would really invite anyone who feels excited or activated about this model to think about, I feel like step 1 is like reflecting on which one are you or do you feel like you identify with? Knowing and with that, which one is your triggered state, and then starting to think back on like what are maybe interactions recently that I've had where I felt on the receiving end, or maybe I was on the giving end and didn't feel heard. And I feel like once I started, even for this week, to reflect on the conversations you and I had, or, me and the girls had, I was very like in my face aware of how much work there is to do to increase awareness in moments of like peak emotional state.
Mhm. I have so many things to respond to that. Number 1, thank you for sharing. Number 2, thank you for seeing me and loving me perfectly. And number 3, thank you for calling out one of the most important points of all of this is that there's no finish line to this work. What we're really talking about is awareness, communication, and empathy, which is what creates all the results that we want in our life. As somebody who's been teaching this model for 10 years, I get triggered more than most people, right? I got my own stuff going on. And the goal is never to make ourselves wrong. None of us are wrong for whatever bucket you default to. None of us are wrong for whatever bucket that you get triggered to. The goal is to be aware of it because then that gives you the ability to make a conscious choice, right? None of us. people we love, our kids, right? Like as a parent, that landed for me, right? I have to proactively keep myself in dream state with my 8-year-old because
Yeah.
he'll throw out so many ideas that we can get done in a day. And daddy wants to be like, bro, that's 7 weeks worth of stuff. But then I also don't want to poo poo his dream. Like, yeah, well, what could this look like? And what could this look
Kate
like? And
could go to the skate park and ride my scooter on the skate park, and I'm like, "Okay."
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's really, to your point, I think the most important thing is the validation of it. What we all crave as human beings is to feel seen, heard, respected, and loved, or HULA'd, heard, understood, loved, and accepted, right? Any of those land. But the point of recognizing somebody in a bucket is not to get them out of the bucket. It's to meet them in the bucket till they feel complete. And then they're willing to move out of the bucket. And so for me, when I stood up, I recognized that you and I were tangoing on a floor that neither of us belonged on. And one of us had to be willing to get off the dance floor. I walked inside, I prayed for 10 seconds, breathed. And I'm like, what am I doing? Get out there. And I was like, honey, what I hear you saying is,
Yeah.
right, I can't imagine what that feels like, right? But when we think about this, the validation part is the biggest point. Because to your point, you've even said to me, and we've had conversations. I'm like, honey, what would have been helpful for me is at the beginning, if you just told me you just wanted me to hear you. And you're like, yeah, I just want to dream for a minute. That allows my brain to go to, oh, just dream. I ain't going to fix anything. I ain't going to build anything. I don't have to find anything. I don't have to do anything. I just get to play in possibility.
Mhm.
And then sometimes you're like, honey, I actually need your help planning this. And you see me get activated. I'm like, oh, man mode, let's go. How am I going to get all this done and coordinate the day and
Yeah,
plan the road trip, right?
yeah.
And I think it's important for all of us that the goal is awareness, but having that awareness doesn't solve it. It gives us the tools and the perspective to be able to choose how we navigate that situation. And so validation is huge. Just like when we have dreams, we want to be heard like, oh, honey, what I heard you say is you want to do this. You want to do this. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it brings you to reality of like, okay, how could we do that? And so all of them, and I would submit too, I don't even think the business side of this model is on the same universal impact as it is intrapersonally. And I mean every friendship, every client, every business partner, every person, my son's school teachers, like the baristas at the coffee shop, like you name it, when you start to be aware of these things, it tends to drastically deepen relationships because you're operating with these awarenesses and you have the ability and the tools to shift them and to be heard, right? And I know for me sometimes, like, I think, and I'm sharing just openly for people listening that this might resonate with, but some of the times that I end up in protector aren't because I'm emotionally triggered. It's because my capacity is empty and I feel like a chicken with my head cut off.
Mhm.
And the thought of having to do anything else or a question being asked, and the times of my son, he's like, Dad, I'm like, hey, Bubba, can you just give daddy like 2 minutes? Daddy just needs a minute, right? Like, it's so easy to fall in and out of the states, but when we become aware of them, that's the goal, is that we catch it. And we're like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I'm totally being a pessimistic Pam right now, right? Like that ain't helping anybody, right?
Yeah.
Or, I keep hiding in the dream and I'm like, cool. And I've done this before where like I've hidden in the dream of like, if I just dream enough, somehow magically it's going to build itself. And it's, oh, wait, no, that's not how this works, right? Like, I
Mhm.
love driving by the gym, but I've yet to drive by it and found abs in the process, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a certain point where I have to build it. And so the more that these things come to our awarenesses, the more we can have the grace for ourselves. And that's the reason I said, like, none of these states are wrong. And it doesn't even matter why they were installed. But one of the examples you gave of like poo-pooing on our kids' dreams, that might turn them into builders because they're like, if I want this done, I have to do it myself. Or that might down the line turn them into protectors and everything is critical for them, which was me because I grew up similar to you, but mine was homeless. So everything was bad. So that means as a coach and an entrepreneur for, a good decade, the only way that I succeeded was protecting and critiquing everything. And then I realized that that is not a good natural state to live in the lens that I was living in it. And I worked really hard to like work through those things. But for all of us, there's awareness because I want to also say this for everybody. The finish line is being able to oscillate between the three. And I look at that now as a state of like really healthy emotional regulation where if you decide you just want to sit there for 10 minutes and stare at the mountains and dream, you're not poo-pooing on your own dream or asking. You're like, oh, I'm just going to dream. And then if you're like, I want to execute this idea, you're like, oh, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And then you're aware enough to be like, oh, yeah, but I've never done that before. So I might want to learn something or two about this. Right. And it's this really healthy place where we can end up oscillating between them. And I think that that is the end goal with these. And it's not that you've mastered them, it's that you're aware of them. And if I could put a finish line in place, and I know you didn't ask this, it is that ability to be able to morph, right? Like at freedom's will, when you're like, honey, I have an idea. I'm like, dude, let's talk about the idea. And if like, hey, I want to plan this, I'm like, oh, I feel completely safe to go into the plan. And I think underneath all of it is us being aware of what those tickles are, right? What is activating us? Where are we allowing ourselves to get tilted off? Where have we had, spent 90 days on this best idea ever? And then one random douche on Instagram's like, you shouldn't do that, or leaves you a negative comment. And all of a sudden you throw your dream in the trash, right?
Right.
Like those aren't
Right.
healthy markers of like us loving ourselves and stewarding ourselves and doing it. And so that this model for me is like one of the deepest, most powerful models, as long as we keep it in our awareness and we practice it.
Mm. And I think that the the thing that was interesting at the retreat specifically where this got shared, and it just in case it's helpful for anybody, because obviously we're talking about on the interpersonal level, we went to a dinner that was mainly men and me and Kelsey. So two women and the rest was men. And it was interesting because all of them had shared the same sentiment. And obviously, many of the people that listen to Ambitious are women. And one of the things that every single man at that table shared is they love to solve, which is that they were like, anytime my wife, one guy was his fiance, their girlfriend comes to them and says, I want to do this. And I'm thinking I have this like really big idea. They're like, okay, let's get to it. Like, let's build a plan. Or I'm really frustrated because this isn't working and this isn't working. And I feel like I can't do this. Like, okay, great. Let's make a plan. And so I think it was really interesting too, because obviously you shared that you are a solver. And I knew that about you. Like anytime I bring something to you, I know you're going to solve it before I even probably am finished telling you what it is. But it was interesting to also have that shared sentiment with other people that were there. Almost all the other men that I spoke with after they knew this model said that their natural response in any situation with their female partner is that they try to go to seek to solve all the time, which basically means they end up 9 times out of 10 in builder as just their natural operating system. And so it was an interesting conversation because it was just a nugget I wanted to pass along that, like, if you are dating or maybe you're married, to ask, like, could potentially even take this model, bring it to your partner, say, "Hey, I listened to this super super cool podcast today where they talked about this framework, and I wanted to share it with you," almost like a love language to say, "Which one do you think you are? When you get, like, a really emotionally activated when we talk about this topic or that topic, which one do you think you go to?" And, like, just using this almost, to be honest, which sounds might be maybe a little weird, maybe people are not like us, but, like, use it as, like, a date night conversation to be like, "Hey, I had this really interesting thing," because to your point about with the teams, when you bring it to their awareness that it exists, now you're all indirectly on the same page because you can call out the dream, you can call out the protector, and you can have an awareness of like, "Hey, let's shift state because I feel like we've been living in this bucket for the last 45 minutes." If you're the only one who has this awareness, it's really difficult in a relationship to ask the other person or invite them in because they have no idea what's happening. The best thing, the most impactful thing in that time was that when you walked away, I knew exactly what you were doing because we both knew this model and we just kind of in communication know the different ways that or different themes or flavors of how we talk.
Mhm.
And so when you left, I had an inkling that this may have been you state changing. I didn't know. I was like, part of it's like he's never coming back, and part of it was like he's just state changing. But either way, I think that there's this power in having a shared understanding of this model, like to your point with your team, but also I would really invite you to do this with your partner because I think that if
Mhm.
you are dating or if you have a really super close friend that you guys get into really heated debates or conversations, which I know even with my family happens a lot at Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner, having this kind of like shared rules of communication is so helpful because it means that when you do need to shift, you're not feeling like you are the only person who can carry these changes or shift
Mhm.
these states alone. You kind of get to do it together. And I feel like for us, it's been a huge thing that's really helped our communication and helped our ability to kind of like hear what the other person's truly saying because we understand what state they're in.
100%. I'm gonna add some to that because we are in a long distance relationship. So when we see each other, we tend to hermit away from the world. We're like, get away from us. We have time to catch up on and to
I have
pause and
5
reflect.
days with him. Nobody talked to me. Yeah.
Nobody talked to me, right? Like we
Yeah.
disappeared, but also
Yeah.
like at the event, we got to be around people and got to witness. And one of the things that we both heard so often is like, I can't believe you guys are as close as you are, love each other the way you do, and the things that you talk about. Like it was almost like shocking, right? And truthfully, that's because of these containers. It's because of this model transparently at the very start of it all for us to be able to have those conversations without either one internalizing it. And we've had a lot of them. And I mean, like, I think it's why I love you so much and why we're so close. But it also makes it extremely safe. Like one of the things you've said to me, even early on, I remember after I taught you this model and you do this magical thing where you use my own models on me because
Yeah.
you're upset that I used said models on you and didn't tell you for so long that it becomes this game that we play.
Mhm.
But I remember we were having this conversation. It was around, I don't know, it was like right after Christmas or something like that. And you were like, hey, honey, I just want to remind you, like, we got to talk about this, but it's not you and me against each other. It's me and you against this thing. And I was like, oh, yes. And then you even use it to help prompt me. And so it's a really safe communication modality. And I almost look at it like it's a get out of jail free card because even if in a moment you looked at me and you're like, hey, you're not dreaming with me, you're protecting me or being a protector, go take a walk. I'd be like, man, she's right. Oh, and like I'll go walk and it takes 30 seconds
Yeah.
to state
Yeah.
change and then to come back. And I would just add to what you said, business partners too. Anywhere where you have an intrapersonal relationship, the most important thing to understand is that the strength of that relationship dictates the strength of the results that you create. And so much of it can be handled by when we understand this and we're willing to dance with this and we'll play with this. And it is important that the other person knows. But sometimes getting them to know is by giving them a different experience than what you've had before. And all of a sudden, your husband's like, how do I feel like you get me so much better now? Like, why you're actually listening to this right now, honey? What happened? Right. And like, why are you doing this? She's like, actually, like, I realized all too often when I talk to you or you come to me, you just want to plan and you want to solve it. And I've never realized that before. And it's important to me because I live in dream state. And so I want to make sure that you feel heard. And it's somebody having an experience of this model is what typically opens up their curiosity and desire to want to learn it or to want to use it because it really, really is simple. Like if I need something from Kate, I'm like, hey, honey, I actually need you to poke holes in something for me. And she won't naturally. You love me too much, right? But if I'm like,
Mhm.
hey, honey, I need feedback on this. Could you take a minute and give me feedback? You also feel safe enough to rip me a new one,
Yeah.
knowing that I'm asking for it. And I'm like,
Yeah.
cool, right? Just like sometimes I have a vision and I'm like, hey, I can see this, but like, hey, babe, I can't see how to put this into practice. Can you like help build it with me? And it's just these micro invitations for us to identify the state or to see where we are. Because I think when you understand this model, and this is something I don't talk about publicly, but when I've coached couples, that's happened, is we each have our default state, but then we find a very comfortable dance together and we'll end up stuck,
Mm.
each one of us in that state. And so the more awarenesses we have, we can help pull each other out of it to make sure that even in our life or in our business or in our vision or in our relationship, we're making sure that we're operating in each one and we're not
Mhm.
just, greasing the groove over and over and over again.
Amazing. I feel like I have no
Nope.
notes to add. You covered it all. You
Yeah,
covered the
I think
origin
I think
story,
I think we got it all.
the framework, the business, the personal, the real life examples. If there's someone, which I feel like anytime that we talk, frameworks or any kind of strategy, whether it is personal or business, I think that there's a natural energy and momentum and excitement to go do something with it. But then also, where the heck do I start? So, do you think for the person listening, if they're like, okay, I really want to start to flex the muscle of this model, number one, I would say you could listen back to the episode slash take the episode, run it through ChatGPT and ask it for some notes for you, because that will help you to give some of those rules for yourself and have those noted down so that those can be a way from which you operate. But if someone wants to take this and learn it, do you think that they should do it on their own first? Should they do it with another person first? Like, where should they start now that they know this model and what some of the kind of guidelines around it are?
It's a great question. You answered this earlier in the episode. The first thing you can do is apply the awareness of this to yourself. The better you know yourself, the better you'll be able to utilize this and facilitate it. And so that means, like, to Kate's point, and I'm just reiterating what she said earlier in her genius, is like, which one are you in? And which one have you been stuck in? Or to your point earlier, like, I wonder where, or what are some instances where, because now I see this, that this could have been the case, or this could have been, where the miscommunication was. Because the more tangible you can see it and feel it, the better you can facilitate it and apply it. And so you're the best case study whatsoever. And then the second part is, I think there actually is a delineation here. No matter whether you're going to use this for an idea or for intrapersonal, they both require you to be aware of them. So even if you're using this for an idea, it would be really helpful for you to take this. And it can take 15 minutes. I've done these as short as 5-minute stints in each bucket of, like, take right now, if you're listening, an idea that you've had that you've been stuck on, that, like, the one that's moved from sticky note to calendar to sticky note to notebook and still hasn't started, right? Like, take that one and set some time and use your calendar and set 3 different times and give yourself 5 to 10 minutes in each bucket and see what comes out of it as you follow the rules and you utilize it, because it will help you have clarity, which then you'll be able to use that to facilitate with your team or even your clients. Because I use this all the time, and I've done this model for so long that I just use it in conversation now. I'm listening for each part. I'm, like, listening for the dream. I'm asking questions for the builder. Most everybody's really good about protecting themselves. And typically, if it's my idea to a client, they go default to protective because it's something new and different.
Yeah.
And so the more you practice it, the better you get at it. And on the intrapersonal side, your awareness of these things, where you are in your natural state, is the most powerful place. Because even when you teach it to a partner, or you teach it to a friend, or you teach it to a business partner, you're going to have a different understanding of where you are and where they are. And it's going to take some time and practice for you to be able to do it. But practice it, because I promise you it's worth it. This is one of those models that there is nothing but gain when you use it and you practice it. There is no downside. There is no effort. It's really an awareness that allows us to communicate effectively. And so this is the one where I'm like, if there's anything, you have to practice this everywhere. And you can do this to yourself as well, in both buckets. Where are you noticing yourself poo-pooing on your own dream? Where are you noticing yourself getting stuck in dreamer and never asking how could it be done? And it starts to bring to these awarenesses.
That's something I just wanted to add, that just light bulb for me as you were saying that, is you can do this to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So we did this with interactions with other people on your team. And we also obviously are looking at it in the interactions of other people in your life. But there's also a tendency that, like, for example, I'm thinking of that client that I had at your event, and we are natural builders. So for just ourselves on our own, we're not interacting with anybody. We're not talking to anybody. We're just sitting on our own. We're just such a natural builder that we physically struggle to dream our own dreams.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's also a lot of practice in the sense of, yes, the awareness, but obviously just looking at your natural tendency with business, or the way that you integrate day to day, to say, what's my dominant?
Yeah. And I actually thank you for saying that, honey. It leads me to another point. The second part of you being aware of this is flexing the other buckets. So whatever you are, let's say you're listening to this and you're like, and I know Kate's audience, you're all Kate, right? Many builders, right? I've met enough of you, and I love you all. You're like my homegirls and daughters and sisters. Like, I love you. But it's like build, 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 build. And then I've asked this of people before, and I was like, when was the last time you dreamed? And I've had a woman say to me, when I was a little girl. And I'm like, then where are you going? Like, what are you doing this for? Right. And so whatever that awareness that you have is, let's say you're a default dreamer or a default builder or a default protector, proactively, as a part of your day, actually block it in your calendar once a week and give yourself 30 minutes to go sit in a field or sit by the river and let yourself dream. Put yourself in a state to dream and just allow yourself to sit there and think about all of it, what my life would look like, what my business could look like, what my day would look like, X, Y, Z. But if you're a natural dreamer, you're going to do the opposite. Like you're going to go sit in front of a whiteboard or in front of a calendar or in front of something. And for 30 minutes, you're like, how could I build this dream I have? Right. And if you're literally like, I don't even want to put an adjective on it, but if you're the optimist, like beyond optimist, that nothing could ever go wrong, right? Or that there's no resistance and I'm just going to manifest my way to everything. Amazing. I want you to set some time in your calendar and I want you to audit. And I want you to audit from a place of love and protection. Like, hey, what are the blind spots I'm not seeing? Where do I see myself, not doing X, Y, Z? And I think you can apply this to every bucket of your life. It can be your business. It can be your habits. It can be your rituals. It can be your relationship. It can be your communication. But if you give yourself that space, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at the clarity you get and how quickly you can make adjustments to bring all of them into alignment.
I love it. I love it. You've got the framework, you've got the homework, and I think now it's just go, which is like what George we joke between us, like 3, 2, 1, go. Like you just gotta 3, 2, 1 and go integrate it now.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously this is something that you teach in coaching, at events, retreats, all of it. For anybody who potentially wants to learn just like more about this framework, but also like you guys know, hence why he's probably, I think, the only guest that's come back multiple times. If someone wants to learn more about this framework, but also potentially other frameworks, and just truthfully to learn your brain and these examples, because I know that, knowing you and knowing your business and just all the places that you create content, this is something that, yes, I'm sure you probably at some point have a dedicated episode to, but I will say that through the way that you coach and the way that you just show up with people and that you facilitate, the thing that I love about your frameworks is they're so overlapping and across the board applicable. And so if someone wants to learn a little bit more just about your frameworks in addition to this one and the other types of models that you teach in coaching, at retreats, all of that, where is like the best place that you would want them to typically go consume you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Truthfully, on Zoom with me, so I can give you a cup of coffee and just help you. I make you earn it. But, to Kate's point and how she found me is I do have a podcast and I have a website that has everything on here. It's the pinkest website you'll ever see. It's my favorite color. I do have pink shoes on if you're watching. They are always on.
You're so flexible. Good for you.
I know, honey, right? Yeah, I'm working on it. I'm staying limber at my young age. I'm going to make this really, really easy. If you're afraid of me, that's okay. It happens, right? I'm just this Montana man that's squishy and cries a lot. You can just go to mindofgeorge.com. That's where the podcast is. That's where the link is to book a coffee chat with me. Just hit the apply with me. I don't care if you work with me. Just let me help you because I'd rather answer your question and give you frameworks and send you resources and get you on your way. If you're not, then just go to Instagram. It's George Bryant. I'm there. You can DM me. You can ask me any question you want. You can pressure test this. Kate knows this better than anybody. I authentically just want to help you. And so if I have a medicine cabinet full, which I do, I just need to have a short conversation with you and I will find the dosage and the medication and I will ship it your way and I will send it to you. And so that is the best place to get a hold of me. But ultimately, if I had my one ask, it's that every single one of you that this resonated with, you book a coffee chat with me. I just want to have a 15, 20-minute conversation. I want to know you. I want to know about your business. I want to know who I can introduce you to, how I can help you. Whatever that is, like I would love the opportunity to serve and support you.
Amazing. All righty. Well, you guys have your notes, you have your homework. And with that, thank you, honey, for coming on for the 4th, 5th time. I'll have to triple check how many times you've been here, but I think we're looking at about 4 or 5 right now. So thank you for today.
Yeah, we just got to figure out a name for the series, like the Chaos Corner or something like that. Like we need something over here. Like
Chaos Corner is very fitting. So maybe you guys can let us know. Shoot me a message on Instagram. What do we name these segments that you know exactly what you're coming to each time you press play? With that being said, you guys, I will link all of George's info below. You know that obviously I talk about him a lot within this show, but also on social. We do a lot of stuff that's collaboration together. I facilitated his events. We've done events together. So if you are somebody who's just wanting to learn more of his genius and more of his stuff, I highly recommend listening to his podcast. Go check out his social. You will not be disappointed. And with all that being said, I will see you on next week's episode. And as always, stay ambitious.